We are ripping the curtains open today on the book publishing industry, on what it really takes to have a bestseller, the stuff that you're going to be shooketh to find out about how these celebrities, these public figures, these experts that you look up to, most of them are not even writing their own books. How to get a publisher, should you go that route? And you are going to be learning it from truly one of the best in the business. I brought on my friend, Michele Bender. You're also going to hear her absolutely badger me. She has been trying to get me to write a book with her for a while now. And we're getting closer. We're getting closer, folks. I promise you. She is a award-winning, incredible ghostwriter, co-writer, and freelance writer for 25 years. So she has written with Dr. Phil, Yolanda Hadid, and many, many, many high-profile celebrities that you'll learn in the episode. She can't share who those people are because they sign NDAs, because a lot of them don't want people to know that they didn't write their own books. But back in the day, she was like the OG Carrie Bradshaw writing for Cosmopolitan. So she knows the ins and the outs, the book agents, what works, what doesn't work, who really has a book in them and who doesn't. We get into all of it during this episode. You will absolutely love her style, and her transparency. And you're going to hear lots of mention of my guided workbook course in this episode. And the day has finally come. This has launched. It is out. It is here for you to get. And you're going to say goodbye to the soul-sucking grind of whatever it is you're doing in your life, and hello to a life where you're calling the shots. So I went from drowning in my own business to making 10 times more while working less. And I'm revealing my secrets for the first time ever inside my Make More, Work Less guided workbook video course. So this isn't just some basic course, okay? There's 70 plus pages, there's videos, that's all fine and dandy. But what this is, it's your ticket out of the mundane and into the life of abundance and joy that you deserve. Now, grab it right now, because the first 200 people get $200 off, and then it's going to go up. So don't settle for mediocrity anymore. We're not doing this. This is not our vibe for 2023. You're going to embrace the extraordinary with me, and I'm going to show you how. Go to projectmewithtiffany.com/make more work less. projectmewithtiffany.com/make more work less. You can also swipe up, and that direct link is in the show notes. The discount is automatically applied at checkout as long as you're one of the first 200 people. And you can go right there on the description in YouTube, and you will see the link there as well. So excited to guide you to a life that is beyond your wildest dreams and get you into the abundance zone. If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to Project Me with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much-needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash-making advice. Now let's get to it. I'm already starting out laughing because I knew having Michele on that I was basically setting myself up for her to be done with me about the book.
I'm done with you.
That's been talked about since 2020. Thank you.
I mean, I'm done with you. And then I listened to your podcast the other day, and you're talking about how you woke up in a sweat about your workbook and you're ordering workbooks, and forget the work. We're so past the workbook. Like, you have your book. I mean, I listened to your podcast. That is the book. Yes, you need to stretch it out and spell it out and give people exercises, but it's like, that's what you don't realize. You're stressing about writing a book that you think doesn't exist. It exists already. It's just taking the words from the air and putting them on paper. Like, you have, I'm so done. Every time I listen to podcasts, I'm just done. And I'm not saying this because I'm a writer. I can introduce you to 20 people. You can do it yourself. Like actually, you can't do it yourself. You need someone to shape it because that's why you're stressing out.
I would never do it. The reason why I went down the workbook path is I was like, I have
Yeah, you said
to,
you're dipping your toe.
right? Like I have to do something to help break. It's not even the creation of the workbook, it's the vulnerability of
Right.
me putting out something that someone can print that, you know what I picture? And I'm sure there'll be tears in this. This is so vulnerable for me. I picture someone like those like mean teachers in school. I don't have a
Oh,
red
yeah.
pen who take a big red Sharpie and like I picture someone sitting there like scrutinizing it, or I paid for this Tiffany and I didn't learn anything and this was a total waste of my time, and then I would be horrified. And so the workbook is helping me with my fear of visibility in that particular medium. Do you notice this even with other like people who are way more high profile than me? Do they have vulnerabilities coming up when they have
Oh,
their first book going out?
definitely. Definitely.
Before we continue our chat, you keep hearing all this mention of my workbook, and the day is here. My revolutionary new guided workbook video course, Make More, Work Less, has the keys to set you free from that draining hamster wheel you find yourself on year after year after year. Imagine a life where you call the shots and you live on your terms while getting highly paid for it. Plus, here's the exciting part: the first 200 listeners who jump on this opportunity get a massive $200 off. I wouldn't want you to miss out. So I want you to click the link below in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube and start living your best life today. And this is all designed for you to transform your money story and that messaging that is responsible for you being stuck on that hamster wheel in 7 days or less. You can go to projectmewithttiffany.com/make more work less, or again, swipe up. That link's right in the show notes or down in the description on Project Me TV. All right, let's go back to the combo.
And what happens though, what they realize is there's someone like me. First of all, it takes a village. Okay. So no one is writing a book at their computer. I always say to people I work with, we don't sit there and type like in a movie and then you type the end and you pull the paper out. No, that never happens. Half the time I don't even know when I'm done with a book. It just sort of happens.
So wait a second. They don't go where you're going to die.
You think they start to finish?
I swear to God, I was going to go rent a cottage, like Hallmark movie style, like in Vermont. Okay. And like be sequestered for 3 weeks and write the book. That was my next move.
I mean, like you can do that to get content down, but that's going to cause so much stress. It sounds idyllic. That's going to cause it. What you need to do is you need to have a partner, and it takes a village. So even when you have a writer, you also have an editor. So nothing is set in stone. There are so many people involved in that process. First, you have a writer or editor helping you shape it. You have an agent who's involved when you're selling your book. So the way it works is you write a book proposal. If you're going to go the traditional route, we're not talking
meaning
about
like to get a traditional publisher,
a traditional book
okay.
deal. So you write a book proposal, and then that is used that can be used to get you an agent and also to get a book deal, an agent. So I teach a class on writing a book proposal, and it's all the elements of the book proposal. And what happens is that helps you. If you're starting from square one, you need an agent. You can't just say in 2 sentences what your book is. You can't be at a cocktail party and meet an agent and say, oh, I have a book idea, and they leave and they're hiring you. No, you need something on paper, right? So that's the first thing is like, why are you, and that's the first section of the book proposal is called the overview. And it's like, why are you writing this book? Why now? And why are you the person to write it? Right. So you could be a dermatologist who's had skin cancer. You're writing this book because you have the expertise. You just had skin cancer and you have a lot to say, and skin cancer is on the rise. Like, and it's the best are the personal stories that hook you in. That's what I do. So I've been doing this for now 19 years. I've been doing freelance writing for 27, but books. And I fell into it because I was writing for all the top women's magazines. I had a column in Cosmo. a sex and dating column. I had columns in Glamour. Yeah, way back.
So
And
you did like the columns where it's like how to have multiple orgasms.
yes. And it was
So
like,
fun.
yeah, or like 7 ways to spice up your sex life. And so through that, I was writing columns. I had a full career freelance doing that. I loved it. Was like love magazines,
You
always
were
have
like Carrie Bradshaw, basically.
yes, except mostly health, but some dating, sex, fitness. I loved it. And then what happened was one day I get like a really veiled email saying there's someone who we've gotten your name from 2 people. There's a famous doctor who wants to write a book. Anyway, I was about to delete it because this was 18 years ago. And I was like, this is sketchy. But for some reason I didn't. Anyway, it turned out it was Dr. Phil's agent need help with his book on dating. And he had gotten my name from people because I had this dating column. So that was the first time I even realized people had ghostwriters. Like I thought if Hillary Clinton wrote a book or they sat down and wrote the book.
Same,
yes,
1,000%.
right.
And I would go truly up until meeting you straight up. And I'm a former journalist and I covered
right.
many people's books. I had no idea. And I'm thinking these powerful, busy people, they had time to write this book.
Right.
And then it actually made me feel more shame about what's my problem.
Right. Like they're so busy. And that's not what is, even when they actually write the book, there's someone editing and shaping it. But often what they're doing is writing sections. And how I work with people is it varies. Some people want to write, some people haven't put a word on page. Like there was one woman I worked with who wanted to change one word in the whole manuscript. And I said, okay, do it. She's like, I don't know how to do it. So there's people who literally don't write a word. Some people I've worked with doctors who it's very medical. So they write. It varies, but no one is sitting and doing the whole thing start to finish themselves. So it takes a village. So you go into the cottage could be good because you could get a lot down. I don't think you need that. Yours is already done and out there on your podcast. And what if I were to work with you or any writer, they would take what you have and then like build from there. So you actually are lucky you don't need the cottage because you have the outline already.
We need to play like a drinking game with the cottage. This is hysterical.
Yeah, the cottage is great. The cottage you'll do after to celebrate. Because the cottage, you're going to be, it sounds idyllic. You're going to be so stressed out in that cottage.
There'd be nothing happening.
So stressed out, sweating, writing, throwing things out. That's real from the movies where they write, throw it out. But it's not, that's just not reality. And it's good because most people have so much content. And we started talking about this. When it's yours, any talent you have, you don't realize you have it. If you can sing, you think everyone can sing. I think everyone can write. And then I read things that people write. I'm like, whoa.
See, I'm the opposite. Like, even though I am a content creator in terms of the digital marketing world, I'm insecure because I'm like, it's not like I was an English lit major. Like, I'm not a writer. Yes, I went to journalism school, but news copy isn't real writing.
Right.
So I'm insecure about it.
And the world we're in today, people don't want a Shakespeare. They want like a book that's your girlfriend chatting with you. They want a book that sounds like you talking on your podcast to them. When you do your episodes that are just you, that's what people want. Think of the books you love. Those are the books
I like to read. I don't want the books that are hard for me to read. And I'm spacing on his name. I mean, a brilliant man. I just can't read his books. It's like Power of Now. They're like very Eckhart. Is it Eckhart?
Oh, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah.
I can't read that. They're just too smart for me.
Totally.
I like books, like you said, where it's like, I feel like I could just be like having a coffee, with the author.
That's the best. And that's what I always work on. And I also say the other thing that people worry about, and if you were in that cottage, what you'd be doing is stressing over each word, right? And is this what you need to do, why you work with someone like me is because I just say to people, you write, like I'll give them writing prompts and I'll say, you mentioned this story. And this is what I do all the time. And this is what I teach in my writing class. This is what I teach my kids when they're having my daughter's stressed out about something. I say, set your timer for 7 minutes on your phone and write a letter to XYZ or write about that feeling. And I do that with the writing class I have. I send them a writing prompt every morning. And you would be shocked in the 7 minutes. Usually you go over, but if you don't, you don't. But my point is that it's that story comes out. But what people think when they're sitting in the cottage is the words have to be right and every line has to be perfect. So you're editing yourself as you're working, and then you get nothing done. And so I always say to people, just write, like just get what the story and the feeling is important. My job is to clean it up. And even if you didn't have me and you had an editor at a publishing house, they clean it up. Like your job is to actually get the content and the feeling down, and the voice, your specific voice, which only you have on the page. So it's not just you alone. That's a big fallacy, that people think they're just writing this book. And I think when people try to do that is when it doesn't work, because they're
With
editing
anything,
themselves.
quite frankly, in life that you have resistance to, and it's something you want to accomplish, the main reason you're not accomplishing it is because
Right.
you're trying to do it alone. And then someone listening could say, well, Tiffany, you've already realized, since you've been trying to do this since 2020, you can't do it alone. And you met Michele. So why didn't that just happen? It has nothing to do with Michele. It has nothing to do with me having a lack of resources to pay someone at Michele's level. It's the vulnerability for me. Even if I know all your writing's great, I want to dig on this vulnerability thing, because Amazon has made self-publishing very
Right.
easy, right? And so like if someone's saying they want a book,
You could have a book
not
tomorrow.
not to
Yeah.
say anyone's going to, necessarily buy that book if it's just slapped together, but then people don't. And I feel like there's something that's more vulnerable when you're putting something into print. Like
Yes.
what
It's
kind of crap
very,
have people said to you over the
well,
years?
it's very vulnerable because and I've worked with someone who I think that was her problem in getting her book out, which is still not out, because she having an imprint was so permanent to her. You know, I think one thing people don't realize is sometimes people think, who cares about this? Like even celebrities, like I worked with Yolanda Hadid on her book on Lyme disease. She almost died, and it
God,
was
that book helped so many people.
so many people, and it was like Book Authority deemed it one of the best 100 memoirs of all time, and it was because she was so vulnerable and she shared everything. But even people like that, sometimes you're working on a project and you'll say, does anyone care about this? Like, who cares? And yes, because if you help one person, and I always think about, one of my favorite books is The Glass Castle, and it's a small story. She's not famous at the time, and it's a small little story about her life, but it connects with you, because think about, we all feel so alone, right? And then you realize, it's like when you were saying about doing anything alone, you realize, oh my God, someone else had that experience. So there's always someone who's going to care about your story. But it's easy when you get into it and you're working on it, especially week 2 in the cottage, you're like, nobody cares about this, right? And then you start censoring yourself, and then you throw the project out.
It
But
feels very narcissistic to me. And I know, like, you're familiar with my story. It feels, I get that voice in my head of, who do you think you are, Tiffany?
right.
And it's like so self-absorbed, and it's more Tiffany, Tiffany, Tiffany all the time. And last person I want to be like is my mom. And then I get nervous that people are going to be like, oh yeah, here we go again, more of the Tiffany show.
Well, guess what? You know what? They don't need to read the book, because there's so many people who are going to read it who are helped by you. And I always say to people, when you're working on a book, you don't need to tell anybody. I think we're in this, it's 2 things. One, the reason people don't want to write these stories, especially people of our generation, like I see them with my kids, they're much more open. We were taught to tacit agreement to not share family stories, right? You were never told, don't tell anybody this, but it was understood. So
Yes.
we all were raised that way. So we're all afraid to put it on paper because we were told not to share our stories and not air our dirty laundry and all that. So that's one. People really stop because they're like, what's my mother going to think? You know what? You don't have to tell anybody you're working on this book. Because, by the way, you start your book, if you're in traditional publishing, and you write it, it's 2 years until
Oh,
it
is
comes
it?
out.
That's
I mean,
common time frame.
it can be like from your contract. It depends. I mean, I think that just write, like, even if anyone has a book idea right now, just start writing it, because the content's what matters, right? The pulling it together. is the process, but the content matters. But you don't need to tell anybody because so much time lapses. So if you're going to have their voices in your head, don't tell people you're writing a book. You don't need to tell anybody. We all think we have to tell everybody everything. We're all raised to not share our stories, not and to feel like we're narcissists, but you're not. What you're doing is not just sharing your story, you're sharing your story so that someone else can learn from the lessons. And that's why what I love is a book that's memoir-ish, but it has life lessons. And so it's the way you package the book. And then people learn from you. So it's not narcissistic, but I think our generation was raised that way. And even today, like you're not supposed to share what's
Isn't it
going what
interesting though how a lot of these public figures you work with and have worked with, and myself, I have a podcast where you've heard me share
right,
very vulnerably. I'm interviewed on TV, I speak on stages, and I'm the nitty-gritty of my story, and that I'm totally okay with. But then
right.
the
Because it's in
second
the
it
you think it's in the
why?
air.
Yeah, like I
Right.
right, it's in the cloud.
It's in the cloud. It's like it's still there, but people do feel that way when it's in print. And that's why the first time when I'm working with someone, the first time I show them any of the writing, it's very vulnerable because now I've taken their story, put it on paper in front of them, and it's like, oh my God, it's really scary. But what they realize is that the journey of writing a book is life changing because even with like with Yolanda Hadid's book, we started out and there was a lot of content in there that she worked through, like her divorce and everything. By the end, it's like, it's so healing. And this is why I feel like people should write, even if I also teach a class that's writing from personal experience, just so if you might not want to write a book, just getting it on paper is so healing. Like even doing those 7 minutes, like just try it for like the next 3 days, it's healing. If I'm upset about something and I can't figure it out, I set my timer for 7 minutes and I write, what am I upset about?
I mean,
And
the
then I just
truth comes
write.
out when you write, which is why
Totally.
for most of my life, I always avoided journaling, which I've embraced now because the truth really does come out on those pages.
Totally. And it's healing. You feel better. It's like when you tell someone something that you've been like ruminating about. I remember when I was really little and I broke my friend's doll. I broke the eye off her doll, which was like glued on. I don't know what but I was like 5 and I was traumatized. I put the eye back on. The doll was lying flat, got picked up, went home and was like sick for like a week. I felt so guilty. And then I remember someone asking me, the teacher or something was like, what's wrong? And I said, I broke my friend's doll. And I told her, and she said, that can just be glued back on. And I would always tell my kids that story, the point being like, just share with me if something's going on, because I usually can make you feel better because when you're in your own thoughts, you're just in that negative spiral and you don't have any outside input. And so that's like what writing does. Writing is healing because you're getting it out of your body and onto the page. And it really does work.
Is that what your joy is from doing this and being such a well-known ghostwriter?
I love it because
Is it helping people tell their story?
I'm helping people tell their story, and that story helps so many. I mean, the through line for the projects I pick is this going to help someone? So if you look at what I've done, it's everything. I've worked with Dr. Phil, his wife, I've worked with, but I've also done 3 hair books. The first being off with the same author. The first was curly hair, which sounds superficial. And how does that help people? I grew up with curly hair that makes you feel so bad about yourself because the girl sitting next to you in school has the shiny, long, straight locks. People feel like self-esteem and curly hair is a thing. Like now more people are wearing curly, but it still really makes you feel bad about yourself. And what we did with the book is it's changed lives because people know how to work with their natural hair and they feel beautiful. And that's something that I interviewed 80 women for that book. Every single one, it was the same childhood story. Their mother didn't understand their hair. They felt ugly. Then once they figured it out. And so that book has helped. I mean, that's the book I make the most royalties on. It's been out.
Really?
Yeah. It's
I
been
was
out.
I was going to ask you about like how
Yeah.
how that works in terms of, because people always want to know like these people who have books on the bestseller list, like what are they really making? What's going on? So
If
you're
it
telling
stays
me that you can, off of the book on curly hair, you're actually making more royalties than on a super famous person's book.
Yeah, I mean, on some famous people's books, a lot of them you don't get royalties. There's a lot of negotiating, like you get paid. Royalties are negotiating, your name on the cover is negotiating, your name on the inside, your name, all that's negotiating. But that book is help people, and it continues to help people. And through that book, we wrote a book on kids because we wanted to change the dynamic, because and now curly hair is accepted, but it's like it's the same thing, it's the same story. And so I think that I love doing this because it helps people tell their story, which then helps people. And I also see the change in people as I work on their books with them. And I worked on one book with a woman, and she was in a terrible divorce. And the beginning of the book, I call it the X-rated version. We just wrote like everything awful. And I said, don't worry, we're going to pull out the stuff that, and by the end, she was so over it. She was just like, and she healed like in that time we wrote the book. But it's really exciting because most people can't write, but they want their story, they want to share it. And it's a big deal. So you're probably having that feeling of like, you feel like it's so permanent, the book, but it's capturing like a time in your life, but you're also really going to help people.
And I
And
know
you're not
that. That's
sharing
why
anything you
that's
don't
why I'm like
share.
not right, exactly. That's why I've not let go of it, because I know how much it's helped me when I've read other people's books who are survivors of having a narcissistic parent or survivors of extreme sexual abuse. There aren't that many books on it because
Right.
those, due to the nature of the trauma,
Right.
I'm well aware it makes a lot of people not share and hide in shame and be quiet, which is why I created this podcast ultimately, right?
And I
Was
feel like you also, people struggle with what's their book. So it's like, is my book this? It can be all of you are all of you. Your book can be all of you. It can be what you teach in the posse. It can be your story. It's everything, because we don't compartmentalize. So I'm working on a book now that's a business book for entrepreneurs, but she's telling a lot of personal stories in there. Like that's what we love, because I love, a straight business book can be so boring.
very
And this
boring.
is woven in with her stories. How did she figure out how to network like that? And then so there's no, also, that's the other thing. People are like, well, where on the shelf? Well, what book am I writing? Am I writing a self-help? Am I writing business? It
Oh,
doesn't
like what
matter.
category?
What category? Don't just write the book. It doesn't matter, because that will get figured out. But sharing your story just makes it interesting. And the other thing is, nothing has to be perfect. Like, for example, one book I really like is The Four Agreements. But every time I read it, I want to take out my editing pen. They repeat the same words in the same sentences, but it's brilliant. It's taught me so much. I reread it all the time. So it's like, oh, it doesn't have to be perfect. You
That's
don't, if you're
helpful
set,
for all of us to hear coming
yeah,
from you.
it doesn't have to be perfect. Just write the sentences. And I'm definitely get myself crazy and am in my head. And when I work on a project, it's just all encompassing. I'm like in the middle of the night thinking about it. But it's like, you don't have to, like, the words don't have to be perfect to make a difference, right? Someone
That's
telling a
true.
story, they don't. Like, it's the story, it's the sentiment. And then if you go the traditional publishing route, you have a whole team who's there helping you make it perfect, picking the cover, helping you tell the story. More than one person at the publisher reads your book. So it's going to be beautiful and really well done. But we're all struggling to make it perfect. If you're going to make it perfect, you're going to be in that cottage forever. Like, you're never going to leave the cottage, It's
What
just
is the reality going into like this route of doing a book? People want to know, because there's a lot of misinformation out there on making money off of a book. Like there's a lot of fantasy marketing around it. There's
right.
these people now, these companies doing the book in the box, as I call it. You guys
Yeah.
don't do that. I cringe every time I see that, where they promise they'll get you on the bestsellers list.
Right.
Uh, and those don't,
It's
I
just,
don't like it.
the bestseller list has changed a lot too, in terms of I mean, there's now a bunch of bestseller lists, but it's also changed. It used to be a numerical thing in terms of how many books sold that first week. But a lot of people can get on the bestseller list that first week because of pre-orders. And actually, if you read the New York Times bestseller list, they put a little dagger next to those that are more like have been sold pre-orders or bulk orders, adding to the list. So it's great to get on there and have that on the cover. But really what you want is a book that's sustainable over time. So it's great if you have one that's on for 40 weeks, 30, all years. There's some of those have been on. Stephen Covey's book was on there for years. But what you really want is a book that continues to sell and that helps people. And now with the great thing about the world we're now with social media, you can just sell your own book. Like you can have it done by a traditional publisher, but in terms of marketing it, you can get it out there so much more easily. But I think a traditional publisher is great because you get an advance. So how it works is like in an ideal world, you write a book proposal that maybe a small little book proposal, a few pages to get yourself an agent. Then you get an agent. The agent works with you. You write a book proposal, which is about 40 pages or so, or a little more. And it can be, it's the overview. So what's this book about? Why are you the person to write it? Why now? Then you map out your chapters. So each chapter gets about a page, and that's your expanded table of contents. So that's really helpful because by the time, if you map that out,
that's the hardest part.
It's so hard. And that's why book proposals are a ton of work. And I used to charge a lot less. And then you're basically writing the whole book.
Yeah.
You're mapping out the whole book. So now I charge more because it's so much work, but it's so great because once you get to the book project, like the one I told you that I'm working on, it's like seamless. We have a map. We do this, okay, do X, Y, Z. And so you map out those chapters. So that's the hardest part. And also that's to get the voice. The whole point of the proposal is for the publisher and the editor to see what's your voice. What does it sound like?
And that's how they're determining if they want to, I don't know what the right term is, like they want to take on
to buy the book. Yeah.
Okay. Buy the rights to the book.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
is it like, if you're an unknown person, right? You're not already like have a big name. Is there a kind of a standard range in terms of what these advances look like, or is it all over?
So that's a hard question. It's all over the place. They love when you have a platform in terms of social media, which is interesting because there was a New York Times article talking about how even people with platforms like talked about some celebrities whose books didn't do well. So it's like, it's weird that they use that, but that does help. To have a platform does really help and have numbers to show them. And that's part of the proposal. In addition to the overview, the chapters, then there's an about the author, like, more about you. And then there's like, what's your platform kind of thing. Then there's a competitive section where you pick like about 5 or 6 books that are similar to yours. And you write a little bit about each one. Why is this similar? Well, how is mine different? So back to the example about skin cancer. So if I was a regular person writing a book about skin cancer, I could say, well, this book is about skin cancer and it's great, but it's written by a dermatologist. She hasn't experienced it. In my book, I'm going to talk about my personal. There's always a way. It's sort of like you give backhanded compliments, in that section to the other books. And you want to be careful because your publisher who you may be submitting this to may publish that book, but it's just pointing out the difference. And then about the author, and then a sample chapter, which again shows them the writing style.
So they want to see a lot up front to determine. And do you recommend for everyone to at least attempt to go the traditional publishing route? Or
I think so.
Or do you think, or are you thinking some people should go straight to self-publishing?
If you're impatient, or if you have a reason, if you have like a big event or something, like you want the book out now. Also, if you have your own big platform and you can really sell it, you can go that route. Sometimes a book does really well self-published, that then a publisher seeks it out and buys the rights to it. And I can't think now, I can't believe it. There's a really good example of this. It'll come to me where that happened. Like you'll be surprised. I forget. It's a very popular book that happened to. So you can do the self-publishing route. And the good thing about self-publishing today versus 10 years ago is now it's a menu. So you can pay nothing to have it done. And what you do is you split the cost every time a book sells on Amazon, or whatever venue, way you're selling it. The publisher gets a piece and you get a piece. So you're laying out nothing. Then there's some where you lay it out and it's a menu, and how high level do you want to go? And I have a friend who self-published a book about 10, 15 years ago. That was great. And then about a year ago, he showed me his latest one. You would never know it was self-published. It's a beautiful cover. It's great. It's great. So it really is. There's so many options today. the plus, so that's faster. Self-publishing is usually faster, but going the traditional route, it takes a little longer. Some people want the clout of saying that they're a
That's where, I
publisher.
mean, if I don't know if it's my ego talking, it could be like the little girl in me. It's like, I think it'd be really fucking cool to like go through the airport and like my book's there. Now
Right.
wow, like
Totally.
there's something that like is cool about that
It's so funny. That's
experience.
the airport is always the example I give to people I work with for two things. The cover, I always say the cover has to be like, if I'm at the
Absolutely.
airport, what am I buying? And then also just if I open it at the airport, that first page
Gotta
has to like
grab
grab.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a
I
thousand
always use,
percent.
yeah. But so there is something cool. I mean, it takes a little longer. You also have more input from a seasoned team. I mean, I think independent in like self-publishing, it's gotten so much better. And a lot of former editors are working in that world. But there's also, in just in getting help, and with the book proposal, you also hire a writer to do it because it's you're selling yourself, you're selling this book. So
Oh yeah,
and
I would never, it would never happen. I would
right.
never put in that work. I would be so in my head, it wouldn't matter. You could give me like 10 doses of Adderall and it's not happening.
Right. And what's great is if you have an agent, the agent and a few, like everyone's different, but the agents I work with typically are really involved. Like they'll say you send them stuff along the way. So if I'm working with someone, it's me, the author, the writer, and then the agent, and we're just working and we'll send stuff to the agent and she'll say, do this, it needs more of this. So it's really, again, a collaborative process. You're not alone. And then the agent takes it out and sends it to
Shops it around for
shops it.
you.
And a good agent is like a matchmaker. She knows which editor, which publisher will you work well with. And hopefully, the best scenario is you have a choice. After she sends it out, you typically have a meeting with them or a Zoom, or in the old pre COVID, you would go in and meet. And, hopefully you have a choice and you see, do you connect with that editor? It's really exciting because most editors I've worked with are amazing and it's so great. And then they're there to help you. And they bought the book for a reason. There was something in it that they bought that book for. And I've heard stories. I have in my writing class, I have guest speakers, and one is an editor who is at Hachette, and she was at a former publishing house, and she got Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk, came on her table and she rejected it. And she's like, okay, that was a mistake. It wound up being, a huge bestseller. So it's just connecting with people. But I think that getting the words on paper is what really scares people. I think the blank page, which is why I recommend the 7 minutes. And it's also why I recommend working with someone, because you can just sometimes people are better. Like you're a good storyteller. So you're probably better if we sat you just telling me your stories rather than you sitting and trying to write it.
Correct. I'm much better verbally. You know what fear just came up, and which means I know there's people listening who have it too. With the traditional publishing route, obviously they have to protect themselves and vet the author they would be
Right.
representing. And now I'm asking you this because I could really run with a story that could be a total lie I'm making up. I'm picturing that they're saying, hey, Michelle and Tiffany, like, we love your book. We love your story. We're going to have to interview Tiffany's mom and like vouch this
They don't
story.
do that, but what they do, I haven't had that experience. They do when you finish writing the book, legal goes through it and will point out different things and say, maybe you should change that. Or did they really say that? There's also fact checking. So that's another thing. They won't fact check with your mom, but they will fact check little like actual facts, but also just details. Did you work, was Bloomingdale's on 59th Street in 1983? Like, so all that stuff, but I haven't had that experience where they've ever had to, because it's still your story, but they
Right.
do
It's
have
it's
legal.
coming from your perspective. Okay. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, and
I'm
legal gets involved. So it's kind of, again, it's another safety net. It's like, just write, and then let them say, change this, tweak this, and you can always change.
I do think people are afraid of it's the what will they think, even if their story's not as wild as mine.
Right.
But let's just even say they want to do a book on, on doing permanent jewelry, or they're a tattoo artist, or, on being a successful realtor. And there's no craziness in the
Right.
book. It's the what will they think? And I always feel the they is like, what will my family think? What will my
Or who does she
coworkers
think
think?
she is? She has a
She has a
book.
book. Yeah. What do you tell your authors when they come to you and have all of that fear
I
going
just
on?
say, like, let's not think about, like, you don't have to tell anybody. The only time I tell people to tell people they're writing a book is it's like in my writing class if they need that accountability. And then you tell nice people in your life. You don't tell the naysayers, but you tell your best friend and you have her check up on you. I mean, that's why people take a writing class, right? So every week, I mean, that's how I started my career. Was I was working in advertising. I went to graduate school for journalism. I wanted to be a writer.
Didn't you go to Medill? You went to
I went to
Northwest,
Medill. Yeah, I
which
went to
but they rejected me, by the way, you guys. I wasn't smart enough. But go ahead.
and now look at you now. I went to undergrad there and grad school. And then I got into a job in advertising through, like, there were no jobs. And I took the job. And 3 months in, I was miserable. It wasn't creative, it was account executive. I was miserable. And to make myself feel better, I said, I'm going to take writing classes at NYU at night. And so I did. And a lot of it was personal writing, which I loved. And I was like, okay, I hate my job, but I'll just. And then one day, Elizabeth Crow, who was the editor-in-chief of Mademoiselle magazine, came to speak, and she mentioned freelance writing. And it was literally a light bulb went off, and I was like, this is a career. And back then there were personal first-person essays in every magazine. There were also magazines were everywhere. This was a lot.
Listen, I
Loved.
still subscribe to some mags. I love a
Yes.
good mag.
Love. That was my favorite thing. Like growing up was
Absolutely.
like a new
Love.
magazine was everything.
Exactly.
So I realized this. So then I would do my job at the ad agency till 5 or 5:30, and I was out my writing. But in the interim, in this NYU class, the teacher then she took people who really were good writers and who really wanted to work on their writing, and had this personal class in her living room. And every week you had to come with 2 pages. No, you could not, it just wasn't even a thought that you come without it. So my week starting on Tuesday night, because the class was Wednesday, was like sweating and stress every day until like those 2 pages stressed me out every week. But I'd get it done. Then I would be relieved Wednesday night. Then it would start Thursday. But what happened was you just wrote for the class. So in that class, just for my 2 pages, I wrote an essay about, I had 2 dogs at the time with my ex-husband, golden retrievers. We lived in New York City, and there was a dog run near us in Soho, and I wanted to join. I thought I'd just call up, they'd give me a key, and that was it. Well, the writing, getting into that was like getting your kid into college. I had to fill out an application. I had to wait. So for my 2 pages one week, I wrote this funny story on that, and that was it. And I put it aside. Well, a few months later, there was a whole controversy in New York City about dog runs. And so I took that controversy, made it the lead to my story, added my funny story that I'd already written, and dropped it off at the New York Times as an op-ed. And it was a Thursday, and it wasn't even email back then. I dropped it off, and that night I got a call from the editor. He said, if you're willing to work with me all weekend, this will run on Sunday. And I was like, what? And it ran on Sunday, and it was a full page. They did an illustration. It was amazing.
Oh my God.
And so after that, while I'd been working at my job in advertising and taking my writing class, I was sending personal essays out all the time to all the women's magazines, getting rejected upon rejection. I mean, I still have them just to remind me. And then that came out, and all the editors who rejected me, my phone didn't stop ringing. Hey, that story you wrote about bike riding, can I have it? Or ballet? And that was the start of my career. And so it's just forcing yourself to get something on paper. Had I not had that class, I wouldn't have written that. And it's just, so it's like the big fear is the blank page and the vulnerability. But even I wrote a story that also ran the New York Times called Shopping for a Shrink. And this was a long time ago. Now everyone has a shrink. Back then it was not that normal. And it was vulnerable to talk about that. I wasn't there. My grandparents were like, wait, what? And I talked about the different experience of finding a new shrink. And this one fell asleep while I was talking to her, and this one didn't talk. But it wound up, I got so many letters from people thanking me for writing that. So it's like, even though you're vulnerable, and even though you're going to help one person for sure, for 100%. So isn't that worth it?
I think so. Wow, you really sold me on the book.
Oh my,
I'm
well,
going to.
I can't even with you. I'm over it. The
It
workbook
is.
is like dipping your toe in. You are like ready to jump in the ocean. Okay.
Dying. So how can people who are like, okay, I get it. I need the support. I want to do this version of like the class that you were taking early in your career. Now you offer a virtual version of
Yeah,
that.
now I offer virtual and it's great. And people come with it and they're really scared to read their piece. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned that. You have to read your 2 pages in this class I was in and in mine, and then you get feedback. And it's amazing because first of all, most of it's a great feedback. Most people who have that desire to write are good writers or good storytellers. And so it's so exciting when you put that and it's just like putting it on paper is therapy. And then you read it and you leave and it's just you've changed lives in that little classroom. And then so it's like just getting it on paper is my advice. Like just it doesn't even have to be journaling, but just putting your timer on for the 7 minutes most days and just write whether and one thing I always say if you can't think of something, write a letter to someone. That always helps. It directs your focus. It could be anybody, but it's like, dear so and so, I want to tell you about my childhood, and then launch in because there's something about a letter that's very focused and you're talking to someone. You don't feel like you're just out there by yourself. So that's really, really helpful. And then once you have all that, I also say, so do the 7 minutes. Don't take a week of doing that. Don't look at any of it. And what you'll be surprised, and don't edit. Like there's no crossing out, there's no grammar. This is about writing. It's not about sounding perfect. Don't edit. And then in a week, look at what you've written. And most of the time I'm like, oh my God, I'm such a good
You're
writer.
like, that's pretty good.
You'll be surprised. You won't even remember having written it, but most people feel that way. They look back and they're like, wow, that was really good. And then so that's like one way to just get it out and even get ideas out there. And then when you're working on a book with someone, it's like you have the support of a writer. And there's there's a great organization in New York City, Gotham Ghostwriters, that has ghostwriters, and you just reach out to them and you tell them what your project is and what your budget is, and they connect you. And they're one of the top agencies. And what's interesting is ghostwriting now is really coming out of the closet. There's been so much with Prince Harry's book. There was a lot of talk about the ghostwriter. There's been a lot of talk about it. It's no longer like,
It was like it was like a
yeah,
secret, which is why most of us, including me, didn't know they existed. It was like you wanted to believe that it was the person who wrote every
right.
single word, and anything other than that was bad. Where you said like you negotiate having your
The
name on the book,
byline,
I wouldn't be embarrassed at all to
right.
say it. I'd be like, own it.
And
Yeah,
also it's
write
their
this on my own.
story.
Like,
Right. And
yeah,
it's
right,
your story. Everybody at work, I've had people say to me, oh my God, how can you write someone? And there's like a lot of people's books I've written, I can't say
right,
because I
right,
signed enough.
right.
But people will say, how can you do that? You're doing all the work, but it's their story. It's their ideas. I'm the vessel to get it from their mouth on the paper. It's not my
I don't
story.
think there's any shame in that game. I think
None.
the shame would be if you have a story to tell
And you don't
to
tell it.
and to not tell it. And yes, I heard those words come out of my mouth. Did you send us the links for this class so we can
I
make
sent
sure
the
they're in the
links to
show
my
notes?
website.
Okay.
And so on there you can, and what I do for the class is I do like a 10-15 minute call with people before if they want more information or just to see if they think it's right for them. I can explain more about it. But whether you have a book to write, I mean, often the best way to start for a book is to take a class like that. And then, because it kind of forces you to write and then it gives you content. And what's great is you can love to write and be a good writer, but hire a writer and just give them content. I'm working with someone now who's giving me stuff. It's great. I love it. And so many people have so much. You have your podcast recorded, people have journals, you have so much more, and people do care about your story. I know that sometimes I'll work with people and they think, does anybody care about this? They actually do.
Yeah. It's true. And it's hard when you're in it. And all the links to Michelle's stuff will be in the show notes and in the description here on Project Me TV on YouTube. I mean, the takeaway is very obvious for me. And you know what's crazy? I have to end on this. How many people ask me, "Do you have a book? Where's
I
your
was
book?"
just gonna, literally just
All
gonna
the
say
time.
that to you.
And you know what? And you would think that would be enough, for me to go, well, obviously people are going to buy it. But then my story is, yeah, they say that, but like, how embarrassing would it be to go to a publisher, work with someone as renowned as you, and then we put it out there and almost no one buys it? I'd be so embarrassed that I let
But they
everyone down.
do. People will buy the book. And in terms of the publisher buying it, what happens is you get feedback from all the editors you sent it to, and they give you a reason why. And so either we readjust the proposal, or you go out. Every publisher has so many editors. Your agent goes out to 10 more editors and 10 more editors. It's never fully rejected. And if you hear the stories of top writers talk about it all the time, that their book was rejected 45
It's true.
times.
I do hear that all the time.
All the time.
It's more like I put it out there and it's a dud.
That's just not going to happen with you.
You just know this.
I 100% know this with you. 100. There's
I
no
will
way
go
it's a
into
dud.
hiding. That'll be
There's
so
no way it's a
embarrassing.
dud. It's just not. You have too much information to share.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And I believe you because I know you wouldn't
I mean,
bullshit
I'm
me.
not just saying it. I would
know that.
never.
I know that. And that's why I can hear you and why I wanted you to come on, because there's so much information and there's all these, I don't know what we want to call them, influencers out there who now she has a book and
Right.
and it's like, then they go on a book tour and then they have a party and then they have a cake that's like designed like the book. And it's the
Yes.
same thing over and over again. And it seems there's something icky to
Right.
people about it. It seems so insincere. It seems like it's a
Totally.
marketing plan. And I think that turns people off too.
Totally. If you really have something, if one person has said to you, do you have a book or you should write a book, you should think about it. And I was just going to say that to you before you said that people probably come up to you all the time and
all
ask
the
you
time,
that.
literally all the time. And my line is, it's in the work. It's coming.
Right.
It's coming.
And it's like, just because you say it on the podcast, people can't take notes fast enough. It's a different element.
Yeah, and I love a book. I mean, I'm a reader. Like, I love a book. I get it. Well, thank you for sharing your
God,
wisdom, your transparency, all of the things. I adore you. I'm so happy that we're
so
connected.
happy.
You're a special soul, and I see you and you see me.
Oh my God, I love you. I mean, we like really connected.
Instantly, you guys. And that we both know how rare that is. And
it was literally like instant.
Yeah, and I don't take that for granted. I'm aware of it. So thank you for coming on.
Oh my God, you're so welcome. Can't wait to hear about your book.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a 5-star review on iTunes. Not only will this make me super happy, but it will allow more listeners to find our special show. Simply help me help others.